today's edition of Pegasus Test. On today's edition, we have Dr. Christopher Larsen with us to talk about his series of books on tactics. Doc, take it away.
Okay, the series of books. Yeah, well, it comes with a bit of a story. So,
Doesn't everything?
Yes, it does. So Les has been kind enough to invite me here, and he's letting me share the story of my publications, which I should start and say, when I'm saying publications, I mean the 6 book titles. And yes, some of them are in their second, even third edition. And so even an edition, that means something legally within the industry. But nonetheless, there's actually just 6 book titles, although I am working on several more as we speak. But there are published 3 book titles. In addition to that, in a PhD program, you wind up doing all sorts of different research, and therefore research publications in academic journals. I've got a couple of publications out there in professional journals. One that I have cited in my own channel a couple of times is the Infantry magazine, U.S. Army's Infantry magazine from Fort Benning, Georgia. And so, I do, my gig is human cognition, and I study that in ways of decision-making models, but also in education, how humans learn, what coping mechanisms we develop around learning. And so it's kind of a natural transition what happened here. I mean, One Shepherd, as you know, starts in 1981, but it doesn't actually become a true school. Like we say, okay, we're becoming a bona fide school with a curriculum and a program and everything else until 1995. And so what happens is I go off to work for the South Korean government, and gosh, I want to say it was 96 through 98 or something like that. And when I left, they're like, oh, okay, smarty pants, well, you've started this curriculum and everything, but you haven't trained the trainers, so give us a book that trains the trainers. So I did that. And you can see, May 1998 was when this was published, and it was a private in-house publishing, meaning I was in South Korea at the time, so Sang-ho Publishers developed this, and they ran, I don't even remember what it was. I can't remember if it was 50 or 60 copies, but it was never intended for sale. This was given to all of the, then black hat instructors, right? And this was a train the trainers called Tactical Battle Drills for Small Units, and again, it was intended really just for the black hats. And it distributed well. You can see I wrote on them, and so I've got number 6, and I've got a couple more copies, but I hold them very dear because you can't get these anymore. They're not in print, and so there's that. And people still have them. I still see them come up once in a while, but this was an effort, as I said, to train the trainer, but this comes directly from my experience in the Army as an NCO, and primarily, I got to play, platoon sergeant here and there, and I even got one time to be a company first sergeant and literally move a mechanized infantry out into the field. So that was quite an experience. But the point here is that primarily I served. Most of my time was serving as a squad leader. But being a squad leader is kind of cool because you get intimately familiar with everything happening in your fire teams, fire team command, and all the weapon crews. But you also are constantly pulled up to platoon level, rarely to company level, but once in a blue moon to company level. And so it's a really interesting place, and you can see that being a staff sergeant, which is the lowest of the senior NCOs, but it is a senior NCO in both the Army and the Marine Corps, Staff Sergeant E6. And so being a senior NCO, you do get that full gamut, that full spectrum. And so what I write about, writers write about what you know, right? And so what I knew about was small unit tactics. And I define small unit, not tactics, and not even tactical units, because I recognize a battalion, a brigade, a division can be tactical within a certain type of battle environment, right? Okay, so but the thing is that small unit tactics don't have battle staffs, and you recognize that as a young corporal right away. You're like, whoa, battalion and brigade and division all have these, battle staffs. Whether it's just 20 or at the division, it's 900 human beings on the battle staff. Nonetheless, you're going, wow, that is a luxury that none of the small unit tactical commands have. They don't. You got a fire team leader, you got a squad leader, you got a platoon command team, and a company command team. And so I was very comfortable writing about that, but I will admit that this first work is a little bit of a, I don't want to say naive, but a bit novice. It really is from a squad leader perspective. And my assumption is that everybody here is teaching fire teams and squads only, right? And so, you know, this is the maturation of Doc Larsen is what this is. This is 1998. Mind you, I served from 85 to 94. So I had just, you know, recently gotten out. And I capture a lot of that, you know, that mid-level fight, that high-intensity fight. But again, this is fire team and squad centric, and it's teaching the instructor. So what happens is, that's 98. What happens is by 2005, I have returned from Iraq as a military advisor, where I taught far more at the platoon and company level. And so the mastery of that came out, and then Light Infantry Tactics comes out. And it has two cool things. It is still predicated on the squad, let's be quite clear. But I'm constantly bridging up to platoon and company because, you know, I'm more aware of why that needs to happen in this book. But the other thing about this book is who the audience is. And the audience for this book is what I call the uninitiated. I'm not calling them naive. I'm not calling them stupid. I'm saying if you don't have a military background, this book will make sense to you.
Yes, that I will completely agree with, because out there on the civilian market, there are plenty of copies of the CCT Guidebook for Marines, Battle Skills Textbook, and all that stuff. It's all in military speak. This is in human speak. It's in English.
I think that's it. It's too. It's a very. This is a self-publication, and so through Author House, and frankly, it's from an editorial perspective, it's sloppy. It's not poorly designed and put together, but it has lots of typos. It has, you know, just all sorts of, like, sometimes even content error. But that said, what I constantly get rave reviews on this is that, number one, it's a very large format. You can open up Light Infantry Tactics for Small Teams, and you can see images that you're like, oh, look, I can actually read it. I can actually, even it's black and white, I can see what's going on in the pictures and in the diagrams. And the print is very large. And so if you're a guy who's like, I don't want to pull my glasses out, that's the power of this, that it's in common speak. And that's because that's who it was written for. I had so many people say, non-military people say, I don't get it. I mean, I want a detailed description of what an infantryman does. And I'm like, okay, that's what this is. But its weakness, other than the typos and everything, its weakness is, as you said, the size. You know, it's way too big to fit in your cargo pocket. And so this doesn't travel to the field so well. It's not bad in a classroom, but, you know, under tactical operations, and it's really not written to go step one, step two, step three. This is far more about explaining what success looks like than how to get there. And that's been its. Now, this is my #2 bestseller, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But what happens is, in 2005, Light Infantry Tactics, or LIT, for Small Teams comes out, and you can tell how it's built and improves upon this. But the other thing was, this kept getting stolen, so to speak, by the Jundies. The warriors in One Shepherd kept going, oh, look, there's a free one, and they would grab and run away with it. And so that's why people started numbering them to go, hey, wait, that's my copy, you know. And so Light Infantry Tactics then was for everybody. It's like, forget the instructor. I'm talking to brand new warriors who are uninitiated. Look, this is a great way to get your head around what you're going to learn here at One Shepherd. But within just a handful of years, 2005, people said, look, what you really need, because so many people in One Shepherd are doing, you know, grabbing these books and using them, you need to go one step further. You need really full color illustrations. You need a step-by-step, by the numbers. How do I do this? And that's where this book,
the absolutely worst titled book in the history of books ever.
It is. This book is just god-awful bad. So let's talk about why Paintball and Airsoft Battle Tactics is such a rotten title that cut our throat. And then I'll put that into perspective. But it did. This book should have been the powerhouse #1 hitter. This book should have been it. It's not. And it's not for several reasons that the publisher insisted on. First off, it's been so long, it was 2008 this comes out, And it's been so long that I no longer actually remember the exact title, but I remember Battle Tactics was in it. So I want to say it was Squad and Platoon Battle Tactics, or Battle Tactics of the Infantry Squad and Platoon, or something like this is what it was supposed to be. But, I mean, Voyager Press, in many regards, and when you see this book, they do a beautiful product.
That's why I say it's the worst titled book. The content is outstanding. For a former military person like myself, Guidebook for Marines, no matter what edition you have, it has the same mimeographed, that have been Xerox copied, that have been photocopied and scanned drawings from the 1950s that look like a 3-year-old did it. Or Lance Corporal, one of the two. And then there's
crayons were involved.
Crayons were definitely involved. And you also have these staged photographs, black and white, from the early 1970s, where it's clearly some admin pogue who was drug out for a photo shoot in his perfectly pressed utilities with his 782 gear on, flat as a pancake. There's just no canteen in it. There's no mags in the pouches, and he's just staging a photo. Where all your photos in here are actual demonstrations. They are people actually performing the tasks in the field. They're in great color, so you can actually see what the photo is, other than this kind of blurry image.
Sure.
And the illustrations are big, and they're concise and crisp, and they haven't been copied 7,000 times since 1952.
Yeah, that's just it. Plus, my wife is a photographer, a professional photographer. That's what she does for a living, and she did the photography on this. Now, I always have to say this, because she's like, that's some of the worst photography I've ever done in my life, because she's like, this is, canned. She's way more into a documentary film and this sort of thing. But anyway, but nonetheless, her professionalism comes through, and the graphics and all of this other stuff. So this was supposed to be our knock it out of the ballpark, and the publisher came and said this. Voyager Press came and said, look, here's the thing. I get what you're saying about your target audience, and they admitted we've never worked with that target audience before, but here's the problem, they said. The problem is that we want people to buy it. And I'm like, yeah, well, me too. And they said, so you're discussing that these people will use paintball and airsoft, and of course I also said tabletop games, Nerf, and video games as well, but they locked on to the paintball airsoft because one of their researchers had done some research on that and really looked at how many Americans were doing that, and that's what convinced them. And they went, okay, look, you're right. A lot of people in America use paintball and airsoft for gaming platforms. And I said, yeah, but it's not just the gaming community. It's those people also train. And what I was specifically saying is, look, you've got militia members and private military contract, PMCs. Now, a lot of people will argue that private military contractors and militia are one and the same. And I don't say that's exactly true, but I would admit that if I draw a Venn diagram on a whiteboard and I overlap them, you'll see that there's this remarkable overlap of how we define and the function of a private military contractor versus militia. I'm not saying they're the same. I'm saying they have a lot in common. And so this book was supposed to be written for that professional audience, but with full recognition of their simulation systems, primarily paintball and airsoft, right, as a simulation system. I didn't really go into miles yet because you'll notice it's 2008, and that at December 2008, this came out, I want to say June 2008, December 2000, no, that's not true, it was December 2007. Anyway, the point is, One Shepherd had just gotten miles, so it didn't even make the photo shoot, right? We had just gotten miles when this thing comes out. And so we didn't even cover it from that aspect. But nonetheless, you're going, well, that's kind of a long story to say they changed the name. And what happened was paintball and airsoft guys, whether they're professional, semi-professional, or just a Saturday pickup game, bought this and rightfully raked it over the coals. They said, look, I was looking something to improve my Saturday morning pickup game or my speedball game and bright colored, outfits running around air inflated obstacles, and I'm getting how to conduct long, range reconnaissance. This is ridiculous. And they said this is only applicable if you go to one of those super hardcore mil sim games in paintball or airsoft, that happen a week in Thailand, a week in London, or England, or out in the Midwest of America. They're like, look, if you go to one of those things, then yes, this is applicable, but otherwise, this is not applicable to our sport. And so they beat it up, and I agreed with them. The problem also was then that private military contractors and militiamen do not go for their references, for their training references, to airsoft.
No, they absolutely do not, because there is no training value there. I will say that.
Right. They don't go to paintball resources or anything. So what I'm saying is this title missed both. I mean, it alienated both of the markets that it could have appealed to, but it wound up alienating. And now I can put that into magnitude. This one was, like I said, I think there was 60 copies ever made, and that's all it was designed to do. It was never commercial. Okay, so now we talk about what makes a successful. I do want to put in magnitude, because I think it's an interesting discussion just how much of, pardon me, an abortion this effort was, in spite of the fact that it's my favorite book. Of all my titles, I would say I think this is my favorite, and by content, by design, by the illustrations and everything else. So fiction, I think, make the profit for a fiction book, like your paperback or something like this, somewhere around 3,000 copies sold. 3,000. And the publisher is making money. With nonfiction, particularly illustrated, it's somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000, and there's a range there because, how many books, what kind of paper, it's all this stuff. Is it color? Is it black and white? How many graphs are involved? But somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 copies sold, a publisher makes money, has broken even on their, broken even on their investment. And from that, from 5,000 to 7,000, they start making profit, lots of profit on every copy sold. Okay, for nonfiction, for fiction, it's down around 3,000, usually because there's less illustration with it. Okay, so you're going, 3,000 and 5,000. After that, we all make profit, right? Great. How many make it? How many non-fiction books, titles, make it to 5,000 to 7,000 copies sold, breaking even? The answer is 3%.
Wow.
Okay. Actually, I want to say, I'm sorry, it's 5%. It's 1 in 20. 5% of book titles, 1 in 20. And you can see why publishers are so reluctant to publish things like this, because only 1 in 20 turn a profit for them. The other 19 fail. They don't do it. It's 5%. Okay. By the way, so let's take that on out. Only 3% make it to 10,000 copies sold, and only 1% make it to 30,000 copies sold. Okay, so keep that in mind. At 7,000, you're at the 3%er. At 10,000, 5%er. At 10,000, you're at 3% of published nonfiction books, and at 30,000, you're at 1% of nonfiction books. Okay, so this one, 35,000 copies sold.
Outstanding.
It's gone over 35,000, and to me, it's the sloppiest one I've ever done. But I do admit that this has some certain strengths that we've already detailed. 35,000 copies sold. My favorite book, and by the way, these aren't even my bestsellers. The 3 I'm showing you here aren't even my bestsellers. My bestsellers are ones we'll cover in another video, but they're the professional books. This one is 13,500 copies sold. It's just over 13,000. Now, I admit, you can go, well, dude, you're in the top 3%. Yeah, but I'm not joking. I was estimating lowball 100,000 copies sold. There's no reason, if this sells 35,000, that this shouldn't be somewhere between 3 to 5 times the number of sales, where in fact it's 1/3 the number of sales. And so that's just how badly a title can kill it. And they did a few other things that kind of went, oh my God, like in here there are anecdotes, there's stories, story time with Doc, and it's not always my story, in fact, it's frankly other people's stories. They gutted those. They took all of those out because they wanted to sell this. This book sells at a price break of about $18, and they wanted to sell this at a price break of about $13. So the way they got there was ripping out those stories, because this is a higher quality piece of paper, right? And so they were, and I'm like, please sell it at $18. And they were like, no, we want to sell it at $13, $14
So
a price.
that's an interesting thing. I remember G. Gordon Liddy once said in an interview, asked about his autobiography, Will, and he's like, why did he have that title? And he goes, you get to write your book. He goes, you don't get to name it. Clearly, you've just proven that.
Yeah.
And from what you've just said, though, clearly you don't have 100% control over your content either.
You don't unless you self-publish, but then what you've got to wind up doing, this is my first self-publish, and what you've got to do is you've got to pony up for the staff. I did have a designer that put that into InDesign, and we sent it off, I think as a PDF to Author House. And so, and then it ran off, but you just didn't have the team that this group did. This group had artists and, and editors, editor teams, artist teams that put this together. To their credit, they had a publisher team that just really dropped the ball because they admitted we don't understand the market audience that this is targeting. So they dropped the ball, but nonetheless, it wasn't horrible working with the Voyager Press. I don't want to drag their name through the mud. I actually enjoyed working with them, but the title was a fundamental misunderstanding of who the target audience was, and to share some of that culpability, I did not spend enough time explaining to them why they were wrong with this title. I explained to them I was disappointed. I said, no, that's not it. I said, it's condescending. You're going to be patting paintball and airsofters on gamers on the head going, oh, isn't it so cute? You want to be like the real men. And I'm like, no, don't do that. It's condescending. But, I just didn't have the crystal ball to look forward and say, hey, would you like to literally sell 10 to 12 times this? Well, here's what you're going to have to do. And so it was a learning lesson for me, too. They don't share all the blame. But nonetheless, it's, like I said, it's a fantastic title. Excuse me. Yeah, not. It's a fantastic book that just has the world's worst title. And it shows you what a title can do to a book. I mean, you pour your heart and soul for years into these things. This is a 3-year effort. And then it just comes out and flops. So.
Yeah. That's got to be heartbreaking on a certain level.
It is.
But to everybody out there, it is an excellent book. It's available on Amazon, I know, and probably other places as well.
Yeah.
It is an excellent book. Everything's explained in a great detail, in easy to understand language, with most concepts having some type of illustration and photograph, if not multiple illustrations and photographs to go with it. And if you want to understand a concept, you're understanding a concept, or you're just a novice who wants to understand what they're talking about on the news, it is an excellent book to do that with.
Well, I appreciate that. And I will say this, that I mentioned I've got several titles that I'm working on, and the truth is I've been working on them for years, off and on. But I'm beginning to think, okay, it's time to pull the trigger, but here's the challenge. If this is for the novice, and this is like, okay, no, it's time to train your squad. It's time to train your squad or your platoon. You private military contractors, you militia members. This is what that's about. The next one is, okay, you always have those 2 or 3 guys in every platoon that are what we would call warrior scholars. They're the nerds who love to dive into why do things work, where did this come from. Let's have a scholarly discussion in depth about why this camouflage pattern, why not that camouflage pattern, or why we do this technique, this tactic that way. How did that emerge over time? How did different environments or weapon systems impact that, and where did it evolve from? If you love that sort of nerding it up, that's actually what the next series is going to be. And I don't have a publisher for this yet. It's none of my current publishers right now, to my knowledge. I've got to find a different publisher. And that really is, something I'd love to get out in the next 2 or 3 years, is get that series pushed out. I would say there's 3 different titles. They're all at different states of readiness, but overall, I'd say it's about 40% done. And so it's really an academic approach to this topic, where that's not the approach here. This is really about monkey see, monkey do, or explaining why we do. But this is a whole academic approach to it.
Interesting. I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah, me too. All right,
well, hope you all found this fascinating. Please check out these books. Doc, where can people get them?
Okay, so I'm sorry, you can't. I'm not giving up my copy, right? But you can find these two. I'd say they're most readily available on Amazon. It is true that you can go through Author House and purchase Light Infantry Tactics, and you can go through Voyager Press to this day and purchase Battle Tactics, otherwise known as Paintball and Airsoft Battle Tactics. But you can also get them through Amazon, and usually, frankly, at a better sale.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Doc. We hope you all found this interesting and informative. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and tune in for future interviews with Doc Larsen.